Hello everybody, I'm Godzilla 1991, and today/tonight, depending on what time it is when you're watching this video, I will be talking about the Destroyer Monsters HD/Gashapon Set 2, which is continuing on the 1968 movie, because as you can see, all the kaiju in the set with the exception of one are from Destroyer Monsters. 3 are brand new sculpts, and 1 is a redesign. Now when this set was announced, like not all but most other high-grade sets, I got excited. However, this time I was more than excited, I was super enthusiastic, because the set contains 2 monsters who have been requesting since I first started collecting these figures, an updated model of one of my favourite characters, and an incarnation of Godzilla that I think is often overlooked, and we're going to start off with him. First up is Godzilla 1984, or 84 Goji, the only incarnation of the character to date to have a number rather than a name to the suit, even though I jokingly call him Pepper Goji because the drink Dr. Pepper was I believe used to promote the movie, and throughout the film itself there are times where you can even see Dr. Pepper vending machines in the background, hence why I call him Pepper Goji. By the way, this was not only the Godzilla to kickstart the Heisei series, but he was also the first incarnation of the King of the Monsters who returned back to his villainous roots, because the last time Godzilla was seen in a movie, he was still portrayed as a folks hero. However, Toho made him a force of nature again, like he was all the way back in the 1950s. But despite that, looking at his design, although yes you can tell that he was made bad again, but those eyes still look pretty cartoony and rather human looking, so it's like the kid-friendly Showa Godzilla is slowly morphing into the animalistic depiction of the Heisei period. And of course, many years later, Gamera went through the same treatment too. I like his tail, which is long and whip-like, as can be seen on other Godzillas, but I have noticed that on this model, the paint job on the tail has stopped halfway, where it wasn't really like that on the actual suit, as the mini spines, as I call them, were the same colour as the main spines. And speaking of which, let's now talk about the dorsal spines, and the arrangement on them is quite unique, I gotta say, because they are for the most part quite small, or at least at the top, then they become big a bit in the lower area, with one acting as the dominant spine. 2004 Final Wars Godzilla, aka Final Goji, would also possess not identical but a similar arrangement of spines, albeit in reverse. His colour scheme is as usual charcoal, and the dorsal spines appear to be a shade of bluish colour. I'm not sure what kind because I did just look it up. And the pose appears to be representing him making his rampage throughout Tokyo. Remember earlier when I said that the eyes are still animated looking despite the tone of the movie? Well, the head also appears to be going for that particular phase too, even though compared to the original Shodai Goji, it looks kinda stumpy in comparison. Again, like with 68 Godzilla, 84 Goji was long overdue. While he had his own vinyl model, as well as the animatronic cyber version of him from the Bandai Movie Monster series line, but never one for the high grade range. Well, one time I thought that he did, however that was only the 1994 Godzilla, or Morga Goji, forgive me if I butchered that, and it was just the way he had been designed, because that miniature appeared as if he had been done by memory, not like today, with the Monday models. A lot of research is provided, and computers are involved. The 1980s only saw 2 Godzilla movies, those being Godzilla 1984, or Return of Godzilla if you're an American, which actually premiered the following year. It's why it's sometimes known as Godzilla 1985, and of course Godzilla vs. Biollante in 1989. So just because there are only 2 Godzilla films of the decade, we now have all of the Godzillas from the 80s. Up next is Anguirus, the only updated miniature out of the set, because the original, as much as I love it, and you've seen him on the odd occasion, such as in episodes of Kaiju and Cryptids, and one time he was reviewed as part of the officials group, as I call it, links in the description below, but again it does look as if he was done by memory, and not to mention that he also has a bootleg counterpart, to which again I own and you see now and then, where this brand new Gashapon model is more like it. Well, almost. Because firstly I'm going to talk about the colour scheme, which is chocolate brown, the same colour that was used for Rodan, Baragon and Vaughn respectively. I would say Mothra too, except she had a different shade, and in Destroyer Monsters, Anguirus appeared to be, if my memory serves me correctly, ash grey, and the spikes on his carapace were golden yellow, even though he didn't look like it, but bear in mind that the character was meant to be weathered, to be fair, and not to mention that the prototype image seemed to show a lighter brown, well at least from the main body, so I really don't understand why he's lazily painted chocolate brown again, especially when you have 3 other kaiju figures that were also in the same colour scheme too. I suppose it may be for cost reasons, but anybody who is a sucker for accuracy, well, this is really going to set off their OCD. However, if you're a talented custom artist, then you could always just repaint him, and for the other three, because they had their own unique shades as well. That's what I don't like about the model. Now for what I do like. For starters, I love the carapace, which makes this character so iconic, especially the spikes, to which I'm sure Salad Fingers would take great pleasure in stroking them, much to Anguirus' uncomfort. I also like how he is sticking his tail up, as it does actually remind me of a scorpion, as they do this whenever they get defensive or they're stalking prey. And I do love the head, being mostly dragon-like. As I said in the review on the Tamashii Nation's SH Monster Arts Anguirus, that I did a video on not too long ago, links in the description below in case you wish to know more. However, I think on this figure, the nose horn is a wee bit too short, and the canines almost look like vampire fangs, but those are only minor gripes. And the crown of horns are just so satisfactory, even though whenever I look at them, they do make me wish that the spikes of both carapace and tail were painted too, but at least the tongue is nice and red. The pose shows him to be crouched, but he appears to be paying attention. Perhaps Godzilla is informing him on some news, or it's possible that he might be startled by something. He could be trying to avoid King Ghidorah's gravity beams, or maybe the military has stunned him. Again, as mentioned in the SH Monster Arts review, this was the pose that I wanted Anguirus to be in, but I couldn't do it. And also, as I said in that same video, I could have just heated him up. However, I didn't want to risk it, especially after the price of the model. Anyway, the new Obscure Gashapon is very nice. Not a fan of the colour scheme as I mentioned earlier, but the rest of the sculpt does make up for it. So he's close to being perfect. On his own he's great, but when placed next to the other three kaiju that wear his colours, he kinda blends in, even though I haven't tried this out yet. Anyway, before we move on to the next figure, this is what he looks like with Godzilla from the Destroy Monsters Volume Set 1 that we reviewed last year. Links in the description below in case you wish to check the video out. Here he is with Gigan from the Godzilla -1 set that we also covered 2 years ago. Again, link below. And here he is with the Akura Anguirus, which is far more superior in my opinion. I reviewed him in the Godzilla 30th group. Links in the description below in case you're interested. However, that particular video is a two-parter because I had to split it due to YouTube's time limit back then. But at some point in the future, I do plan to re-upload it as one single video. Monster 3 is one I've been asking, requested and anticipated for years, and that would be of course Manda. Now, out of all incarnations of the character, the 68 Manda is my favourite because he does actually bear a striking resemblance to the Loch Ness Monster, well, at least the serpent interpretations of the cryptid. And while yes, I do like the original dragon depiction of him from Atragon, as well as Godzilla Final Wars, but I've always had a soft spot for the Destroy Monsters Manda, as he is the most nesty looking, especially without the horns and whiskers, to which I'll get back to shortly. The colour scheme, what can I say? I love it. Absolutely love it. With the underbelly being cream, the tongue red, teeth white, and the rest of him forest green. However, in the movie, he was weathered rather than shiny like we can see on the Gashapon, but I don't mind it. It's not as bothersome as say Anguirus who we looked at earlier. For the pose, well, how do I describe it? He appears to be on the defense, as if he's fighting something off, like maybe the military or another kaiju. I am aware of that scene of Manda briefly fighting Godzilla, but it was deleted because at that point, the monsters were under the control of the Keelak aliens, and it would have been out of the blue, so it was cut. However, he did invade London, albeit off screen, and it's possible that he could have made this position when up against the United Nations Intelligence Task Force. Yeah, I know unit is from Doctor Who and not Godzilla, but because I'm quite the nerd and sci-fi geek on both franchises, it's just a bit of fun. I should also point this out, because Manda's prop was a huge puppet, and no actor in a suit, well, at least to my knowledge, so whenever we saw Manda moving, he was rather sluggish. It's why he never took part during the Battle of Mount Fuji with King Ghidorah. If Destroy Monsters was made nowadays, then I believe it's safe to say that Manda would be a more flexible kaiju. It was also the budget at the time. Let's now take a look at his head. And the first thing that you'll be quick to notice with this particular incarnation is that he lacks horns and whiskers, as seen in Atragon. However, because King Ghidorah was also going to be in the picture, my guess is that the authorities at Toho thought that having two dragons with not identical but fairly similar looking heads would have been too much, hence why both whiskers and horns were removed, giving him that classic Loch Ness Monster appearance. I also like the fangs. They're stuck out quite similarly to Anguirus, and the tongue really looks nice too. the Destroy All Monsters incarnation of Manda has always been on the top of my request list, especially when I discovered that he wasn't part of Bandai's original High Grade series. Guess it never occurred to anybody to include him, or at the time, he didn't get that much acknowledgement like today. So as I said at the beginning of the video, you can imagine how overjoyed I was when I saw him. No, actually, as soon as I saw his promo image, my eyes widened and I became super excited, on the same level that I was when Bandai unveiled Varan for their Movie Monster series line, despite it being a Godzilla store exclusive. In fact, when I saw Amanda, and it was the 68 interpretation of the character, I went all anime kitty cat. So in my honest opinion, you may agree or disagree, because after all, we are all entitled to speak so willingly and have our voices heard. I think that this is not only the best Gashapon model out of the whole set, but it's one of the best high grade figures in general, and I do hope that Bandai give the 68 Manda his own vinyl model at some point in the future, as long as he's not just a straight line and the back feet aren't back to front. But hopefully Bandai have learned from that mistake and will do a much better job on him next time, even if it's just a replica of the old YMSF figure. Finally, and another most requested monster for both Bandai's Gashapon and Movie Monster series lines is the Spider Kaiju Kumonga, who was the villain of his debut film Son of Godzilla 1967, and one of the heroes of Destroy All Monsters the following year, and then became an antagonist once again in Godzilla Final Wars many years later. Now, there have been Gashapons of Kumonga before, such as the Akura model, to which I did try looking for on eBay one time, but it unfortunately cost an arm and a leg, and Bandai did cover this giant invertebrate a very long time ago, back in 2004, which was of course the Final Wars incarnation of the character. However, as much as I like that particular figure, it does actually look more like a generic spider miniature, and you wouldn't believe it to be a kaiju, where this is more like it. The new high grade model has a clean look, where in the movies he was weathered, but these miniatures must look presentable, so the cleanness really doesn't irritate me, like it will do with some folks. However, as I said with Anguirus, if you're a talented custom artist, then you could just weather him up as well as the others, but his colour schemes appear to be accurate to what we see on screen, which is black and yellow. Speaking of which, the yellow stripes on his legs are quite similar to what's seen on the Mexican red-knee tarantula, so I'm guessing they're meant to be a reference. And despite his appearance in Destroy All Monsters, this figure is actually based on Son of Godzilla, because his eyes, as you can see, are purple, where in the latter they were red. Also, the smaller eyes should be purple too, but they've been left unfortunately black, because cost reasons. However, as I've been saying, if you're a custom artist, you could just fix it. And even though the Gashapon itself is based on Son of Godzilla, but it could also work for Destroy All Monsters, if you ignore the colour scheme in the eyes. I like how he has his peppy pals close together like this, because to me, he looks as if he's scheming something, as if plotting his next move. And of course we can't forget about the fangs, compared to something like a tarantula, or even a funnel web spider, but they're still lethal and can pack quite a punch, I may add. Like real life spiders, he possesses 8 legs, however they are actually 4 pieces, but they can be quite loose. So whenever you hold this model, I reckon that you place your hand underneath, just in case they come free. The pointy parts are the hairs on the legs, and he has what appears to be claws on the end of each leg. Like all other monsters who debuted in the Showa series, I do like the original interpretations, and Kumonga is no exception. And where giant kaiju-sized spiders before him were for the most part acted out by real-life tarantulas, Kumonga was a huge puppet, like Mothra and Manda, and as I mentioned at the start, he too, like Manda, was also another requested one, as the Akura figure is just way too expensive. So how about Kamakras and Godzilla 67 next time, and we'll have the entire cast from Son of Godzilla, and also Kumonga deserves his own vinyl from the Bandai Movie Monster series, because the old YMSF model of him is very hard to come by, and not to mention very expensive whenever he turns up on eBay, and he does appear to be rather outdated looking too. So that's the Bandai Destroy All Monsters HD Volume 2, everyone. And what are my final thoughts on it? Well, out of all the Godzilla Gashapon sets that we've been getting so far in this decade of the 2020s, I think that this has got to be my favourite. Mainly because it features 2 kaiju who I've been wanting figures of for years, a favourite character, and an incarnation of the King of the Monsters that was not only most requested, but one that I knew would be a matter of time that he would receive his own high grade figure. However, just looking at this set, does make me very excited for the future of this range, because of all the updates and obscurities that we've been getting for the past few years. I think sure King Ghidorah is going to be in the next set, just so that we'll have the entire cast from Destroy All Monsters, as well as Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of the Astro Monster, aka Monster Zero, and Godzilla vs. Gigan, respectively. And I suspect we'll probably get Godzilla 67 at some point, and also Titanosaurus and Gabra, etc. and so on. So the door is open. Godzilla 1984/84 Goji is great, and so is Anguirus, well at least on his own, but Mando and Killmonger, well because we rarely get merchandise of these characters, they would be the main reason why I would pick up this set, and add it to your Kaiju Gashapon collection. This is Godzilla 1991 signing out. Take care, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.